If you're working on being able to put short forehands away, but at the moment you're a little bit frustrated because you're not able to execute it, then hopefully this video is going to help you, because one of the most common problems that I see from players is they're using an inappropriate footwork pattern based on the height of the ball. Because what makes it hard is there isn't just one footwork pattern or technique that you need to hit those short forehands. Depending on how high the ball is, you have to use different footwork and different swing paths. And if you don't use the right one, it basically prevents you from hitting the shot. So that's what we're going to be going through in this video. Hopefully you enjoy it and find it helpful. If you do, it'd be great if you could give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel before, it would be much appreciated if you could subscribe as well. So one of the biggest challenges that you've got to overcome if you want to be able to be very aggressive off these short forehands is you have to understand that we're going to be using different footwork patterns and techniques depending on the height of the ball. When the ball is lower, we're going to be closer. So we've got a couple of different footwork patterns we'll use when we're close. We'll either be using a hop step or we'll be using a pivot step where we stay nice and low. So often the hop step's going to be a good one to help us transition into the net when it's kind of a little bit higher. The pivot step we'll be using when the ball is much lower. We can't really hop through there. We're having to get right down low and swing through. But we're much closer on those balls. When we're dealing with a higher ball, it's very different. We're now hitting from an open or semi-open stance, and we need to be much further away from the ball so that we can get up into it. And if you get this part wrong, it basically messes things up. You need to set up the right distance from the ball and use the appropriate footwork pattern. Now, the other thing that's going to make this very challenging for you is before you can set up the right distance from the ball, you have to quickly read where the ball's going, and that is what holds most players back. Most players' visual systems simply do not function at a high enough level to allow them to play tennis in the way they want. That's why so many players prepare slowly, because they just can't read where the ball's going. But it's also why people get either too close to the ball or too far away from the ball, even when they do know what they're supposed to be doing, because your visual system has to have amazing spatial awareness to make these predictions as you're sprinting around the court. All is not lost though. You can train your vision and you can improve it. And I want to help you with that, so I created a free program that's going to show you a series of different vision drills that you can work on. It's going to start to improve basically your ability to read where the ball's going, your tracking, your timing. It's going to do a lot of good things. I'll place a link up there. I'll place a link down there so that you can get hold of it. Click on either link, it'll take you over to a different page, enter your details there, and I will send you the program. Because what I want to do now is kind of break down this footwork in more detail, because we need to approach the ball in a certain way, then we need to implement the actual swing and contact that we're going to be using. So now that you understand the spacing, we need to look at the movement to the ball. Obviously we're starting with a split step. I'm not going to focus on that here. I've got loads of other videos that go into it in detail, because what we need to focus on is how you transition into the ball, because this is another area where it goes wrong for so many players. We have to get from moving forwards to now being sideways. So for either variation, we're going to be setting up sideways initially. So if I start with the lower balls first, they're both going to be hit from a neutral stance. So what we're thinking is, as we start to move towards the ball, we're going to be stepping across with our right leg at the same time that we rotate our upper body. So it's this kind of movement where we go in opposition, and this is basically the key point in my preparation, because now when I step through with my left leg, I'm now side onto the ball, and I can hit with the pivot step, or I can hit with a hop step. So it's just something you have to practice and get used to. So as I move to the ball, I step, and then there's going to be often an adjustment step afterwards. So there I did a shuffle step just to cover the distance between me and the ball. Sometimes you might end up doing a step where you step in front of yourself again, but the crucial part is that you get used to this first bit where you step across and then into the ball. Now, depending where the ball is, it's going to look a little bit different. So when the ball is in that position, that's what it looked like. if I'm going to a ball that's going to be a little bit more of an inside out forehand, I'm going to have to be quick to get around it. So I'm going to be running across, but I'm still going to end up stepping across myself as I do this unit turn. So again, slightly different, and there I've still stepped across, and now I've created space between me and the ball, but it's that process of this movement followed by a shuffle step. So that's what we're going to be doing for both the neutral stance variations. For the open stance variation, it's surprisingly similar. The reason it's surprisingly similar is because we still need to get side on, but then from this position, the way that we do our adjustments is a little bit different. If I line directly up to the camera, a moment ago I was shuffling like this because I'm going to make contact there. For this one, I'm going to start in this position, but I'm going to shuffle like this. So I'm just basically shuffling forwards in an open stance position. So it's a funny movement, but what you'll find happens is you'll step in, you'll load, and then I'm just going to be there into contact. So you just have to get used to the transition. If I'm over there, I'm stepping across, I'm around, and then I'm still kind of keeping my open stance ready to hit into the ball. But now it's actually more of just a normal side step just because of my angle in relationship to the ball. And then I can hit into it. And again, just a case of doing repetitions, getting used to it, so then we can hit in. So that's going to be the absolute crucial thing. And for all of those variations, we're loading into this right hip. So if I'm going into this neutral stance, the last step that I take as I bring my left foot through, I'm loading into this hip so I can hit through the hip. If I do a shuffle step, I'm still on that last step, loading into the hip so I can hit through, or so that I can hit through. If I'm doing the open stance or semi-open stance, I'm still loading into this hip as I put my left leg down. So left leg goes down, rotate, and then hit into it. This bit is essential. You've got to understand the spacing. You've got to arrive with the right distancing between you and the ball and loaded into the hip. Once we arrive in position, we've then got to have an understanding of the footwork pattern itself, but hopefully you've got a good idea from what I've already showed you. And then you've got to understand kind of a little bit about the swing path that the racket's going to take, because it's going to vary on each of the shots. So we'll start with the low ones first, and we're going to go to the lowest ball, which will be the pivot step. So for the pivot step, we do that a lot at the back of the court, but normally at the back of the court it's a little bit easier. Here we're going to be dealing with the ball, and realistically it'll probably be a bit shorter than this one is. It's a ball that we're going to have to move up to. We're going to have to try and get there quickly, and because it's not bouncing very high, we're going to have to be low. So as we do the stuff that I've just described, we're actually lowering our center of gravity, so then we can kind of hit through the ball, and then the right leg is going to pivot through. So it'll be a shuffle in, and then we'll be hitting through the ball, and the right leg will pivot through. Now, how well this looks when you do it, or how good this looks when you do it, will depend on your flexibility. I'm not the most flexible person in the world. I work on it a lot, and it's slowly improving, and the reason that I work on it is because it's so important for tennis. And I find these low ones challenging because of my hip flexibility. So if you're less flexible than me, this might be one that you have to work up to. If you're more flexible than me, you'll be able to do this really easily, and you'll wonder what the heck I'm talking about because it's so easy for you. But there's a tremendous variation depending on how your body works. In terms of what happens with the racket head, we need to get racket head speed up the back of the ball. This one, we're going to be hitting from below the height of the net, so we need to make sure that we're getting up the back of the ball. And because we're hitting it from so low, that means we're going to have to get a lot of supination or external rotation in the shoulder, depending whether you use a bent arm or depending whether you use a straight arm. But your racket head is going to have to get into that position so that then you can brush up the back of the ball. And hopefully you can do it through timing, where you kind of snap into the ball a little bit. But if you're not Roger Federer, that does not matter. You can force this with your forearm, you can force it with your shoulder. You're on court, the way it looks doesn't matter so much. The ball's down there, you've got to get topspin to get the ball up, to dip in and land on the other side of the court. So if you have to force it by flicking your wrist and your forearm, do it. We've got to get it up and over. So that is the pivot step. We've then got the hop step. Now the hop step can actually be a little bit easier than that because it's still going to be low, but it'll be a bit higher and it'll look like this. So we'll shape up in the same way, side arm. I'm going to be driving through the back hip to initiate the forward swing again, and then just swinging through. It's a funny movement if you haven't done it before, so you just want to get used to the feeling. What's it like to just do the hop? So different stages of learning, just get used to the hop first, then get used to adding the racket in, then get used to adding the racket in, keeping your head still through contact, and just really familiarize yourself with this movement. Do it a bunch of times without the ball, then transition to with the ball. Now again, we're going to need a bit of spin on this. It's generally going to be a little bit lower. Real high level players can do this hop step when the ball's higher, but the timing is pretty hard on that one. So most of us normal folks are going to be doing it when it's maybe knee height to waist height, somewhere in there, but still height of the net and lower. So now we've got to get a little bit of spin to get it over the net and so that it lands in. And again, you've got to do it any way you can. If you've got wonderful biomechanics, snap your racket into it. If you don't have wonderful biomechanics and timing, just use blunt force and just brush up the back of the ball, because we need the spin for it to land in the court. And then the final one that we've got obviously is this going to be this open stance. Now this one, just generally the timing is really hard. It's a fairly high level stroke. It might take you a while to work on it, but get used to the footwork pattern first. We're loading into the open or semi-open stance. I'm driving through the back hip, so really thinking about throwing the back hip forwards. It's going to be key. Don't even worry about your arms at the start, just throw the back hip forwards and then see what happens. And then what you'll notice is my right leg kicks up behind me as a counterbalance. Again, get used to the movement, then worry about what's going on with the ball. But notice the swing path that I'm making. Previously, the ball was lower. I needed racket head speed up the back of the ball to clear the net and land in. Now, I might be taking it up there somewhere, so I can actually flatten this one out a little bit. And if I hit with spin, it might not work. So this one's going to be a little bit flatter. We're maybe hitting through there, and the follow through is going to come across and down. Now, not because the follow through does anything to the ball, it's just physics. Because I've made contact there, the racket path just follows around. And again, practice it without the ball first, and then start to incorporate the ball. The cool thing is we can really easily practice these with just a drop feed. This removes the timing piece of the puzzle. The ball is already going to be out in front of us. It allows us to practice the footwork pattern and manipulating the racket head. So I might feed myself those low balls and just get used to kind of whipping through it and pivoting around. I can feed myself the hop step. So again, just place the ball a little bit further in front and just get used to whipping up the back of the ball. And then I can practice the higher balls. So again, this one, spacing, I need to be a little bit further away. That's going to be important. Oh, that was a bit low. It's a bit cold. The balls are heavy, but hopefully you get the idea. We can just practice it. Now, what I would say is, because we've removed the timing piece of the puzzle, this should be fairly easy. You should be able to get, 8, probably 9 out of 10 shots like this, because the timing's generally the hard part in tennis. So spend time with the ball machine, figure out the patterns, get used to the feeling of the racket, because unless you can do this with a very high percentage, the chances of you being able to execute it in kind of point and match play is very small. So this is just an easy way to practice. So that should hopefully help you to make some big improvements in your short forehand. The visual piece always comes first. I talk about it a lot because it's the big thing that holds players back. Work on that free program, it will start to make a difference. Then programming these footwork patterns, understanding the spacing side of things, that's absolutely crucial. And then start to play around with the contact footwork and manipulating the angle of your racket face. Don't be worried about making mistakes. I've just said you should be able to get 8, 9 out of 10, but you might start at 1 out of 10. That's fine. Unless you practice and play around with it, you'll never get there. So feel free to make as many mistakes as you need to on the practice court. You'll get better the more you work on it. Okay? Hopefully you found this video to be beneficial. If it was, it's awesome if you could give me a thumbs up. And if you aren't a subscriber, again, that's always appreciated if you can do that. Any comments you've got, leave them down below, and I will catch you next time.